I am so pleased to welcome Michael Weber to the show. Michael is a friend and the artistic director of Porchlight Music Theater in Chicago, and he's here to share his expertise on the beloved musical West Side Story. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. So
Yep.
I think we should tell everybody, New Philharmonic Orchestra is doing West Side Story, and the maestro was supposed to be here today, and his back went out. And so I called Michael, my friend, who knows more about musical theater than anyone in the world, and I said, Michael, come talk about West Side with me.
All right.
So thank you for being here.
Sure, thank you.
And Michael, tell everybody a little bit about Porchlight.
Sure. I'm the artistic director of Porchlight Music Theater in Chicago. We're in our 27th year performing. We perform out of the Ruth Page Center for the Arts in Chicago in the Gold Coast. We predominantly do music theater.
My favorite.
Yes, musicals, but we also sometimes do plays that have music as an essential element. We did a play about Judy Garland, and so it's obviously going to have a lot of Judy's music, but it's not necessarily musical. Predominantly we do musicals, though.
And Michael, there's no one I know who has more intellectual property in their head about musical theater. Where did that come from?
I think that part of it is that when I started out, I really was going to be doing plays. I was really focusing on Arthur Miller and Tennessee Williams and Shakespeare. I was working at Chicago Shakespeare, and then I started getting into music theater and being interested in it. And the thing about it is the history of musicals in America, and the players, and how musicals developed from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. It's one of America's only indigenous art forms. There's jazz and rap and comic books and baseball. And musicals. Musicals are the only thing that really doesn't trace back to like having started in Europe or some other country. It started here in America. So the journey of it and the evolution, and West Side Story is certainly a major part of the evolution, is something that we as Americans can kind of go, that's ours. That's really ours. Broadway musicals, you know?
But, okay, so let's talk about West Side. Mm-hmm. So in my past life, I used to direct, and that's where I met Michael, and Michael knew a person in my cast, and that was, I don't know,
a lot of years
ago. And then that was
a great production of West Side that you directed.
It was a good production. Terrific. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah.
And it's because I had a great cast, you know. Michael, when I think of West Side, I think, to me, I always say it's the greatest score in American musical history. And I say that not to discount anybody else's score, but there's something about it, and I think the story is relevant today as it was the day that it opened. Yeah. And it's the Romeo and Juliet story is woven in there, but it's that score. Yeah. And there's something about that music. And tell us a little bit about what you know about Bernstein and the score and how it evolved and.
Well, the show began. It was not Bernstein's idea. It came from Jerome Robbins, who is the choreographer and the director, and he came to Leonard Bernstein and Arthur Lawrence, who wrote the book. And who at that time was a really wonderful playwright on Broadway, but he had not created any musicals. And he had said, I have an idea for there was a lot of newspaper articles going on in New York at that time about gang wars, about turf wars that were happening. And you're talking in the post-World War II, getting into, moving into the 50s. And so around 1949, they had a meeting. And he said, I want to write a musical about turf wars between warring families on the east side of New York, and it's going to be about a Catholic family and a Catholic gang of boys who are Catholics, and one of them falls in love with a girl who is Jewish, who has recently come over from Israel. And they began working on that project, and it was going to be called East Side Story. And he wrote the book of this. Once they all laid it out and they started reading it, they discovered that it was very similar to a very famous play that had been written in the 30s called Abe's Irish Rose, which ran for years and years on Broadway and was made into a film. And they're like, this seems too close to that, and it seems to not be something we're really that interested to get connected with. And they all went their separate ways because they were all very busy. And then they came back, and what had started happening was now the stories started shifting to the west, north, west side of New York with the Puerto Rican gangs that had been starting to move in as those areas were gentrifying. And Leonard Bernstein really began to see what the music possibilities now could be with these Latin rhythms and that sort of language. And so the show began to shift over to being something different. Around that time, they had heard about this young lyricist, composer, who was trying to get into the business, young Stephen Sondheim. And they approached him to see would he be interested in joining the project, and he was really interested in writing his own music and lyrics. But at that time, nobody really knew who he was. His mentor was Oscar Hammerstein, who said to him, I really think that if you work with Leonard Bernstein and Arthur Lawrence and Jerome Robbins, it's going to be an incredible learning experience for you.
Sure.
Let your ego, be in check for a little while, work with these guys, you're going to learn. And so he joined the team, and now we're off to the races writing a new musical.
But isn't it crazy that they had to talk him into it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the other thing that I can't stop wrapping my head around is the whole Leonard Bernstein writing musicals.
Yeah.
We don't have those people writing musicals anymore.
Yeah.
I miss that. You don't have the big orchestras.
Who was a legit composer of classical music.
Exactly.
He hadn't written that many musicals. He wrote On the Town, and he wrote Wonderful Town, both New York-centric shows. And at the time that he was doing this, he was writing Candide, which is a musical based on Voltaire's book. Very different, very opulent, and near operatic in its tone. And there was some concern, and even he wanted to push West Side to having a little bit more of an opera feel. And they kept going back and forth about that point because they wanted it to be lyrical. They wanted it to be poetic. They wanted to take normal people, and in this particular case, gang members, and elevate them to an operatic capacity of being in the positions of Romeo and Juliet. But the producers and the other writers, we need to make this accessible to a
but
broad
the balance
audience.
is what's brilliant, right? Because you have these amazing, deep, thick orchestrations being sung by Puerto Rican characters that are supposed to be in a gang, and the Jets, the New York kids who are supposed to be. So to me, that blend that they found, who would have thought that? Today, if somebody said you were writing a play about that, they'd say, we got to get a really big rock punk band, right? And I think that we would be disingenuous if we also didn't say a big reason why big musicals don't have those big, deep scores is it's too expensive.
Yeah, it absolutely.
How
a
often
show like
do
West
we
Side
see?
probably cost about $250,000.
Exactly.
A show on Broadway now costs about $40 million.
And to pay all those musicians night after night. The new Philharmonic will have an orchestra of 65 playing that score. You don't get to see it that often.
Right.
You just don't.
That's the thrill of it, that when you experience West Side Story or any of the great musicals from that era, when they had 25 to 30 musicians in the pit, you suddenly are hit with a wall of this music, and you understand how much it is there elevating the emotion
100%.
of it. You have a very different emotional experience when you see West Side Story as played as Leonard Bernstein had originally conceived it. And even
the performers feel different, I think, right?
Sure.
The performers feel that energy from the music when the pit's right there and it's reverberating in them, it all comes together.
It was an unusual idea even in the 50s to do the subject matter of what this is. This was the era of Guys and Dolls and The Music Man and musicals that were there for entertainment. They might have had some political statements or something that they wanted to say certainly about humanity, but there was nothing that was really getting in there to discuss a social issue that was literally happening in New York. So while we think it's even unusual now to conceive to go, we're going to do a musical about this dark subject, in 1957 it was even more so. They thought they were nuts. They thought they were absolutely crazy to want to do this, and it ended up being a game changer.
As someone who does a lot of musicals, when you think about the opportunity to do a show with a full orchestra, how does that play into your decision making?
Well, you know that the entire visceral experience is going to change. You know, a lot of times when we're going to see musicals today, and even in some of the bigger houses, it is much more electronic. You're supplementing music with electronic versions of violins or things like that. What's going to be so incredible for this audience is they're actually going to see they're going to have that orchestra on the stage with them. They're going to see those musicians playing and collaborating together, and in that undeniable emotion that Leonard Bernstein has provided in the score, it will affect the musicians as well. They're just as exposed to this as for all of these years that it's been there. So to watch a musician have the opportunity to play this music, it's a great gift. And to be able to see them as opposed to having them hidden in a pit is going to be a wonderful experience for this audience to be able to see it.
I think it's fun to get to see what it takes to make that music the way it was written, how many people it took. Yeah. You know, we never get to see when we go, like we just watched, I think many of us just watched the movie by Steven Spielberg. Sure. That was phenomenal. And sometimes I'm like, wouldn't it be fun if you got to see how many orchestras behind the scenes members it took to put that together? Right. You know, I don't think people understand how many people it takes, you know?
I mean, back in the day on Broadway, there would be, you know, over 100 people backstage, from the crew people to the people who move the sets, the costume people, the orchestra people, all to just do, and then all you're seeing on stage is maybe 2 people singing, but all of those support people that are backstage making something that just seems like it's a lark, you know, but to bring it all together and to be able to see just that one component, which we just don't have anymore, which is full orchestras playing these kinds of scores, is just going to be a thrilling experience for an audience here at the MAC, I think.
I think it would be a really thrilling experience for people all over to see Broadway caliber singers and an orchestra together, and I know that we've been talking and you have ideas and bringing New Phil and Porchlight together to find a way to collaborate and we'll share that with you if we can pull it together. But I can't think of anybody better to do it with who is more seated in integrity of what a musical was intended to be and how it was intended to be performed, and appreciates the music, appreciates the score. And I think that I love that we have you now as a resource to share, and Michael will be hosting a post-show talk after the show to give audience members a little bit more. As we always know, our audiences love the educational part, and as you can see, Michael is a wealth of education and knowledge, and he really brings you kind of closer to the show in a deeper way that you never really thought about. And that's what I love about having you engaged with these performances. And thank you for agreeing to do the Mac Chat.
Thank you. Well, and West Side is just one of those shows where the stories, the backstage stories, are just legendary. The players were such giants of the industry, and at the height of their careers, writing a piece like this, and some of them, like Stephen Sondheim, just stepping into the arena.
Isn't
so
it crazy?
It's a great story.
Could you imagine that's your big step onto Broadway, and it really wasn't his favorite musical. His favorite work.
No,
right?
And he criticized it for years after in terms of some of the lyrics that he wrote. But again, you're looking at it, I mean, what work did we do as a 20-year-old that we would look back now and go, oh, well, that was perfect. He looks back and he goes, oh my God, I wrote that. Oh, you know, I would have changed this, I would have changed that. And we're like, don't change a thing.
Don't change a thing.
It's perfect.
And I think his youth translated really well because the characters were supposed to be youthful, right? And if he had come up with these very sophisticated words, it wouldn't have felt the same. Right. I think it was awesome.
And I think he recognizes that too, and understands that even his trying to be lofty was him being a young man trying to be significant in some way, and that's what these kids in the show are trying to do. They're trying to be heard. They're trying to make a statement. They're reacting to the environment around them, and in some cases reacting violently, and in some cases just knowing that something's coming, something good. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's right there in the lyrics that Tony is just going, I don't know what's in front of me, but I feel that there's something good going to be in my life. And then, of course, it doesn't end up that way.
Michael, I want to give you an opportunity to tell our audience about shows that you have coming up this season at Porchlight.
Sure, we're about to go into rehearsal for a production of the Tony Award-winning musical Spring Awakening next week. That'll be directed by Brenda Didier, who's one of the great directors around town, directors and choreographers. That goes into production in April. And then we've got, speaking of Stephen Sondheim, we've got our big tribute concert to Stephen Sondheim, Chicago Sings Stephen Sondheim. And we'll be doing the entire concert is music and lyrics written by Stephen Sondheim, and that's on May 23rd.
And where will that be?
That'll be at the MCA, at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago.
That's a great collaboration.
Yeah.
And one thing about Porchlight is I think that you're really good at keeping up with and knowing the great Chicago musical talent, musical theater talent that we have, and keeping engaged with them and supporting them and giving them opportunities to be highlighted. Is there anyone in the shows that you want to talk about, or are you cast yet?
We're in the process of casting the Sondheim concert in. Spring Awakening, Maya Hlava, who is a wonderful new actor in town, is going to be playing Vendela, and Jack DeCesare, who was in our production of In the Heights, is starring opposite her in that show, so he'll be coming back. And it's just a great cast, but there's a lot of young performers. Chicago is just one of those cities that, in the Chicago area, including the things that are going out here, as well as at Beverly Arts Center, there are just so many incredible actors and new directors and voices that are in Chicago that you're always coming upon somebody new.
They really are the best. They are the best. I think that Chicago, I think this is the breeding ground for that. I don't know. There's so much heart here for it. So thank you for perpetuating that and keeping it alive. So come see New Philharmonic Orchestra's concert performance of West Side Story on Saturday, April 9th or Sunday, April 10th. Tickets are available at themac.org or by calling 630-942-4000. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for watching. We look forward to seeing you at the theater and next time on Backstage Buzz.